Thank you for that beautiful music, John Austin. And there are still seats down front. I'm just saying. Good morning. Today we begin our March theme of transformation, which is perfect because look what the Bear Sticks transformed into. I'm really enjoying spring, and I hope you are too, are a harbinger of spring. The calendar doesn't say it's spring yet. Each of us, newcomer or longtime member, from the country or the town, tired and bruised from a weary week, or fresh and bright-eyed, black or brown or white, gay or straight, old or young or in between, each of us brings a strand of self to the tapestry that is Unitarian Universalists of Transylvania County. We welcome all who come bringing goodwill and an open heart. I'm Vanessa Cowie, and I'm your worship associate this morning. I'm going to introduce our guest speaker more fully later in the service. Many of you already know him. I ask you to join me in welcoming the Reverend Rob Field. Our charitable partner for March is SAFE, and I invite Bobby King forward to make a brief presentation about SAFE. Thanks, Bobby.
Good morning. It's another great day to be alive. Plus, Rob is here. I mean, what more could we ask for a Sunday morning? Is that you out there, Ben? As Vanessa said, SAFE is our charitable giving partner this month. As most of you all probably know, they work to help victims of domestic violence and sexual assault. I bet that most of you all had the same experience that I had as a small child and going to bed, and you were almost certain there was a bogeyman under the bed. And you knew that if you dangled your arm off the side of the bed, it would grab your hand and pull you under the bed, and you were terrified. You had that experience? I had it a lot. Anyway, but I always got a great deal of comfort that I could call my father, and that he would come under, he would look under the bed, and he would check all the closets, and he'd give me a hug, say everything's going to be okay. But a lot of kids don't have that. A lot of kids would be fearful to ask their father to come in. I can remember coming home to my mother after school, and she was always happy and welcoming, and I just had this sense of security, that Mom was going to be there. And I never found her crying because of what may have happened the night before or what was going to happen the coming night. But I had a friend who experienced that, and I feel so lucky I didn't. So this is why we need people, we need organizations like SAFE. In 2023, they served 380 victims of domestic violence and sexual assault. Of those 380, 88 of them were sheltered, and they have a shelter, you probably know this, on the SAFE property. They have 24 beds, and if those beds are full, they'll take a mattress, put it on the floor, and try to accommodate more. These 88 people accounted for 5,188 nights. That's a lot of nights for protection. So what do these numbers mean? Okay, what does all this translate into? When I talked to Sally Stepp, the director, last week, she gave me a term I'd never heard before, and it was learned helplessness. I never thought about the fact that this fear, all these, they're learned. And so you're not going to break out of the cycle until you break out of that learned behavior. So one of the things, or several of the things that SAFE does to combat that is they, in addition to providing shelter, they do counseling, they do casework, they do counseling with the children. They have a wonderful program to break the cycle called Safe Date, where they go out into the schools, Boys and Girls Club, Job Corps, Rise and Shine, and they talk to the kids about how to be good partners and how to respect your partner. One of the things that I, wanted to emphasize in addition to that is that it costs to run these operations, okay? It costs $50 a night to provide shelter and then all the services. So as you dig deep today, know that if you only give $50, okay, that it's going to cover a whole night and day's worth of service. Thank you. Let's give generously.
Thank you, Bobby, and let's remember that when the baskets come around. Our minister, Reverend Bob Brangelian, often says that we weave our community together when we open our hearts and share the sorrows and joys that are living there. We can share them whenever our lives touch, of course, in the live stream chat this morning, on telephone, at coffee hour, or when we meet on the sidewalk. And some of us have written sorrows and joys to be voiced this morning in the service. And I'll read those that have been placed on the altar. Ian Cowie, will you come forward to light a candle for each of these sorrows and joys? And we have a number this morning. I will read these into the mic so that all can hear and so that those who are watching us live can also hear. There's a joy. Nancy and Ben Potter, whom I didn't see come in. There you are sharing the joy of having their daughter Rebecca here. Rebecca, want to wave? Welcome, Rebecca. And another joy for a visitor from Nancy Richards, who is happy my brother John could visit from New Hampshire. Welcome, John. He goes to a UU church in Peterborough, New Hampshire. And another joyful candle, and in gratitude for my 19th leap year birthday celebration with this loving, caring community of friends. This is from K-Web. RK and I are forever grateful that our journey led us to the embrace of UUTC. Make sure I'm not missing anything. Here's a candle of concern and asking for prayers for my brother Barry, who is suffering with dementia and has been admitted into a veterans facility in Oregon. This is from Julie Berger, our musical guest this morning. Prayers for her brother. And another candle of sorrow from Gypsy. Please keep my friend Leslie Lathrop in your thoughts. Her husband passed away yesterday after a very bad skiing accident. Let's, just while I check and make sure I got everything, let's light a candle for anything that may have been shared this morning in the chat by our people who are watching online, and another candle for all those joys and sorrows that remain unvoiced at this time. You use covenant to affirm and promote the worth and dignity of every human being. And so in that spirit, we began our service in the sanctuary with a brief but loving greeting.
Welcome back. Hi there. Hi.
To me, one of the most beautiful hymns in our gray hymnal, Singing the Living Tradition, is number 23, which is Bring Many Names. A number of you have shared with me that you also enjoy that one. That will be our closing hymn today, so don't get too excited yet. But I'm taking our opening words from that hymn. When we sing Bring Many Names, a hymn about God, the Spirit of love, the great mystery, we celebrate a living, multidimensional spirit. And in the words of the hymn, a strong mother God, a warm father God, a young growing God, an old aching God, a living, loving God. May it be so. And now our opening hymn is number 12, O life that maketh all things new. Please rise as you're willing and able. The words will be on the screens. We now move more deeply into our worship service by lighting our chalice, the symbol of the Unitarian Universalist movement. Our chalice lighting words are in unison, please. So read with me, Open to the Unexpected Answers by Julianne Lepp. We seek our place in the world and the answers to our heart's deep questions. As we seek, may our hearts be open to unexpected answers. May the light of our chalice be that this is a community of warmth, of wisdom, and a welcoming of multiple truths. Kevin Lausch, our Director of Religious Exploration, has words of wisdom for all of us.
Good morning. Today's words of wisdom is a story called Answer Mountain. And it's going to be a story about being open to change, being open to transformation, which is our theme for this month, and being open to the unknown new. Because while we seek security a lot of the time, we know change will happen. It's the unknown new that comes to greet us every day. And this story is by Sarah E. Squire from the book, What If Nobody Forgave and Other Stories. Well, a long time ago, in a land far away, or it might have been just down the road and happened yesterday, or somewhere in between there's a little town that lived up secure next to a mountain, and they were pretty much a happy little town. They were very secure in how they lived and how life was going to be for them. And above them, chiseled into the mountain, was the words, "The answer is no." Now, nobody really knew who carved those words into the mountain, but they'd been there a very long time, and everybody was very secure and living their life under those words because they always knew what the answer would be. The answer is no. And so they could live that way. And they got up in the morning, if they had to make a decision or they had a question about something, they could look up and see the answer. And this is going to be our congregational participation part. And they knew that the answer is no. Exactly. We'll be doing a little bit of that through this. Well, one day, Dad got up and he went about his day. When it was time that he was going to make supper, he didn't know what to make. So he walked out of the house and looked up at the mountain and said, "What should I make for dinner? Should I make liver?" The answer is no. That's good because nobody wanted liver. But he still didn't have the answer. So should I make popcorn or Pop-Tarts? Should I make tofu or tacos? He just kept asking the mountain this question, and he kept getting the same answer. He didn't know what to do, and it was getting close to supper time, and finally he gave up and said, "This is ridiculous. I'm just going to go ahead and make liver because that's what I thought of first." So he went ahead and made it, even though the mountain said no to it, and nobody liked it. Because most likely nobody likes liver in the first place. Well, this wasn't working out too well, and the next day he got up and he had questions again, but you know what the answer was. So then he started thinking about this and said, but what if the answer is something other than no? But he didn't really know what to do with that. So they had a town meeting, he rang the bell and gathered everybody together. And they started talking about how the answer is always no, but sometimes it's not working for them. So Dad had an idea and he said, but what if the answer is yes? So maybe we could have it changed to yes. And they all looked over at the stonemason and she looked back at him and said, can you go up there and re-chisel the mountain to try yes? So she thought about it, said, yeah, it might take me a couple weeks, but I'll climb up there and I'll start the work. And so she got to work. Everyone waited, really excited about what could happen next. So she re-chiseled the words, came back down, a lot of hard work, and now the answer is yes. And they said, okay, this is great. So the next day, Pa came out, and he looked at the mountain, and he said, well, I'll try this out. Should I make liver? And the answer is yes. Well, he didn't know what to do because no one wanted liver, and the kids threatened to hide in the barn if he made it again. And so, should I make liver? Should I make steak? Should I make tofu? I just don't know what to do with this. And he started grumbling some, and he walked around town and heard the townspeople grumbling too, because they'd started asking the mountain the same thing, and they kept getting the same answer over and over again. So they all started thinking about this, and they rang the bell and called another town meeting and said, what should we do about this? Because sometimes you want yes, and sometimes you want no, and sometimes it's something in the middle. And they talked and argued about it for a while, and finally a little kid came up and said, well, what if we realize that sometimes the answer is sometimes yes, and sometimes it's no, and sometimes wait and see, and sometimes I don't know. And they thought this was a pretty good idea, and so let's try that on the mountain. So they all looked over to the stonemason and said, what about it? And she looked up at the mountain and she said, well, I just worked for 2 weeks to change the answer, and that answer is a big answer, but I guess I could go up to the mountain. It's going to take a while. I can't work as fast as I did before, but I'll try and work on this. And so, but in the meantime, maybe could I just hang a sign up there while I'm working on this? So we'll see how it goes. And the stonemason went up to work, And she worked away for a few weeks, hung up a big sign over it as she was working, just so people knew what was happening and that change was coming. And as she worked, she got kind of tired, and as the townspeople were looking up there, they got kind of tired waiting for the answer too. And so after a while, she said, I'm going to stop work for a little while and rest. And the townspeople knew that it wasn't going to happen right away. So they started talking amongst themselves and asking each other what their opinions were. And they started looking around and reading some books, both new and old and ancient, and finding different answers in there. And everybody got kind of okay with the fact they couldn't get the answer from the mountain anymore, because they realized sometimes the answer is yes, and sometimes the answer is no, and sometimes the answer is maybe, and sometimes the answer changes. And sometimes if you look for the answer, what you find as the answer is different from what you look for and what you find as the answer. And everybody kind of got good with this. And so whenever they looked up at the mountain, they saw the sign that the mason had hung, which said, "The answer is under construction." And that's what we have to live with if you think about the idea of transformation. Because what's coming is unknown, it's probably new, but it's going to be coming along the way soon, and we have to be open to it, and we even have to be open to the answer changing. So let's think about that as we think about transformation in this month. Now, Kitra will bring up our children's chalice candle, and we'll sing her and us out.
Reminds me of our chalice lighting, unexpected answers. Bobby King reminded us this morning how important it is to share our treasure with the community in the baskets this morning, as every Sunday there are envelopes marked with the charitable giving partner for the month. And if you slide a bill or a check in there this month, that will go to SAFE. Other contributions in the basket will go directly to UUTC to keep the lights on and our coffee flowing, and toward our higher mission, which is to support individual spiritual journeys and to promote social, economic, and environmental justice. We receive this treasure with much, much gratitude. Thank you. Now, if you will, take whatever steps you need to ground and center yourself. Plant your feet solidly on Mother Earth, feeling the earth support you. Breathe deeply the air that connects us with all other beings, and calm your mind. Source of all, God, great mystery, we come together in this place of community, of peace, of challenge, of discovery, in this place of love. And here our hearts are open, whether they're open because they're broken, in the case of people who are mourning, the lives that their friends have lost, as Gypsy's friend Leslie Lothrop, or mourning the illness of a brother, as Julie and her brother Barry, or whether the hearts are bursting with joy, like those of us who are welcoming relatives from far away, Nancy and Ben and Nancy. Welcome to Rebecca and John. Or the joy of a milestone, such as a 19th birthday, such as Kay Webb and her partner R.K. celebrated this past week. Our hearts are open. We share here, as we did when we sang our opening hymn, the life that maketh all things new. And as the song says, from heart to heart, the bright hope glows. The seekers of the light are one. I'll sound the bowl for a few moments of silence, and then I'll chime it again to return to our service. Our special music this morning is Rainbow Paradise, words, music, and performance by our own Julie Berger.
Good morning. John asked me to say a few words about this song. I wrote this 20 years ago, and it's about my own personal journey from growing up in a small town and always feeling like there was something missing, the hole in my soul. And I looked everywhere outside of myself, people, things, substances. And next October, I will be celebrating 40 years of recovery from alcoholism. And when I first got sober, what I learned was what I was searching for was a deep spiritual connection with a higher power of my own understanding, and that I needed to heal from the pain of my past. And today, I can say that Unitarian Church was a big part of that. It was the first church that I went to when I got sober. And it's full circle. I've been other places, and I'm right back home again at the Unitarian Church. And this is called Rainbow Paradise. I grew up in a small town in Oregon, where people know who you are. They know what you order at the restaurant and the color and make of your car. I left there searching for lofty ideals. I thought that I had a cause, but I ended up feeling like Dorothy, who was lost in the Wizard of Oz. There is no place like home when you're searching long and hard. That's somewhere over the rainbow paradise begins in your own backyard. I've run to different men, jobs, and towns. The world's a confusing place, but I never discovered the answers I look for by trying to win any race. I thought if I only had more of something, then everyone would know my name. Funny, I had that in Oregon, but I lost that young girl just the same. There is no place like home when you're searching long and hard. That's somewhere over the rainbow paradise begins in your own backyard. I have the wisdom to know what's important in life and the courage to face what I fear, and the peace of mind when one finally finds what they search for has always been near. It is God's light and love within me I've been longing for from the start. I never needed to leave Oregon to find God's love in my heart. There is no place like home when you're searching long and hard. That's somewhere over the rainbow paradise begins in your own backyard. Ooh.
Thank you so much, and we're glad to have you back. Well, it's a joy and a privilege for me to work with the Reverend Rob Field, and I'm grateful to welcome him again to UUTC. Rob and his dearly beloved moved to Brevard in 1997 when he was invited to become the senior minister at St. Philip's Episcopal Church. He and Jane raised 2 children here and never found a good reason to move elsewhere after Rob stepped down from his position at St. Philip's after 19 years of ministry. In 2016, Rob founded Center for Spiritual Wisdom, a nonprofit interspirituality organization here in Brevard. The center, as many of you know, is an interfaith educational organization to teach and support spiritual practices for the sake of personal and communal transformation. Their programs are open to all seekers, regardless of religious or spiritual background. And Jane Field is the dining services manager at College Walk Retirement Community. The Fields can often be seen walking and otherwise spoiling, he said this, their 2 dogs. Our reading for this morning was selected by Reverend Rob. It's by the author Rob Bell from his book, What We Talk About When We Talk About God, published in 2014. we've all had moments when we found ourselves deeply aware of the something more of life. The sense that all of this might just mean something, that it may not be an accident, that it matters. For a massive number of people, to deny this reverence humming within us leaves them cold, bored, and uninspired. It doesn't ring true to their experiences of life. Several years ago, Jane Fonda gave an interview to Rolling Stone magazine. In it, she spoke of being drawn to faith because I could feel reverence humming in me. That phrase, reverence humming within, speaks to the experiences we've all had. Moments and tastes and glimpses when we've found ourselves deeply aware of that something more, the something else, the sense that all of this might just mean something.
Thank you, Vanessa. Thank you for the introduction. Hi, everybody. It's very good to be back here. Good to see your smiling faces, so many of them familiar. Some of them I can even remember your name. Don't hold me to that in every case, but it's good. It's good to be back. So, the title of my sermon this morning is What We're Talking About When We Talk About God. Even if you haven't ever heard me speak before, you can tell by the title that I always go for the light, fluffy, sort of, never challenging, controversial topics. Yeah, can't stand those. I'd like to begin and end my remarks this morning from one of our greatest American poets. These words are from Walt Whitman's Leaves of Grass. I say to mankind, be not curious about God, for I who am curious about each am not curious about God. No array of terms can say how much I am at peace about God and about death. I hear and behold God in every object, yet understand God not in the least. I'm amazed and humbled by Whitman's attitude about religion. Wikipedia says he denied that any one faith was more important than another and embraced all religions equally. And, forgot to bring it with me. I was looking through your songbook, Living in the Tradition. No big surprise, Walt Whitman is listed there, and back under wisdom and understanding, there is this from him. It's longer than this. You might want to look it up. It's reading 659. It's titled For You. You can hear where Whitman is coming from this. The sum of all known reverence I add up in you, whoever you are. We consider Bibles and religions divine. I do not say they are not divine. I say they have all grown out of you and may grow out of you still. When it comes to the subject of God, I'm afraid it is quite possible to sit through a 15-minute sermon on the topic, even listening attentively, and when it's all said and done, when I'm done speaking, conclude with Whitman that you now understand the notion of God not in the least. Going to do my best to avoid that outcome if I possibly can, but we'll see. And I'll stick around afterwards. You can tell me. So I begin after Whitman by saying that I have a personal hunch about how we all approach the subject of God, which is that our basic orientation to the idea of God does a lot more to shape our understanding than just about anything else. We all bring some kind of like subconscious set of assumptions, a kind of framework to this question, probably affected by all kinds of things, some of them we're not even aware of. I think that makes a huge difference. I'll give you one example from when I was still teaching world religions at Brevard College. I would always receive puzzled looks from students when I tried to explain to them that the oldest schools of Buddhism are neither theistic nor atheistic, but are really best categorized as non-theistic. But my students showed up at the college with only two categories in their heads. There's atheism, there's theism, and so most of them had a very hard time wrapping their heads around a third category, non-theism. If you've read some of the earliest known works of the Buddha, you know what I'm talking about. The existence or non-existence of divine beings seems to be entirely beside the point. It's true the Buddha regularly mentions one of the Hindu gods or goddesses. No surprise, since Hinduism was the dominant religion of his time and place. But as far as I can tell in my reading of the Buddhist texts, the Buddha never invokes the Hindu deities to argue that somebody must believe in them or should not believe in them or even pay much attention to them. The Buddha just wasn't interested in speculating about things that ultimately can neither be verified or invalidated. Now, unlike the Buddha, I love to speculate about things that can't be definitively verified. So I think of God as a deep and profound mystery, a mystery that we can befriend and relate to if we choose, but one we will never be able to fully master or fully and completely comprehend. David Frenette is one of my teachers, a former faculty member of the Naropa Institute in Colorado. He says that God is a thou, which is the deepest source of our own being. The deepest part of I, he says, is thou. Frenette says we can think of God the way we might imagine a fish thinking about water. It's the very medium the fish lives in, right? It sustains his life. About 80% of a fish is made of water. So if we think of God as being as a being that sustains all of life, is somehow the source of life, we're talking about something inside us, something that's part of us in a way that's very hard to define. The God who was, the God who is, the God who is to come, perhaps the God who is always transforming and changing, at least in our understanding. Jewish philosopher Martin Buber wrote about God as the eternal thou, a being we can't relate to as an object or a thing. Rather, he said, God is an energy or spirit we can only relate to subject to subject. As you can probably tell by what I've said so far, I am a theist. I always have been. It's deeply ingrained in me to make sense of the universe, human beings, and myself by reference to a divine presence, a higher power, to use the phrase Julie used, a being of some kind, an energy, a spirit. I know this conviction in me runs very deep because I tried to shake it off in college and it just came back soon after. So as I enter the next decade of my life, I'm more aware than ever there are lots of people in the world, maybe some of you here in this room, who reach different conclusions than mine. So I'd just like to say I honor and respect different points of view, whether you consider yourself an atheist, an agnostic, perhaps even a non-theist like the Buddha himself. I've benefited tremendously from dialogues with atheistic and agnostic friends, students, and authors over the years. And to me, agnostics are some of the most honest and brave thinkers on the subject. They get no respect from the theists and the atheists, right? Cowards, they get all kinds of abuse. But it's agnostics who have persuaded me that a once and for all position on the subject of God is kind of ridiculous and not in your own self-interest. What's your definitive proof that God does not and cannot exist, they ask the atheist. And for my money, the atheist can't come up with, at least for me, a fully satisfying or coherent position. And in the next moment, the agnostic turns to me and says, okay, Rob, what's your definitive proof that God does exist? To which I just have to shrug my shoulders and say, I don't really have any. I believe God exists in the same way that I know that I love my wife. I just do. These are things that I know, that I know, that I know. But trying to offer proof of God's existence, proof that I love my wife, it kind of seems beside the point and a waste of very precious time. I'm grateful for the atheists I've had conversations with throughout the years. Such conversations often include an exchange in which the atheist says something like, well, I don't believe in a God who would inflict punishment for violating some rule or other and condemn people to suffer for all eternity. You know what? I reply, I don't believe in that God either. Kind of reminds me of a character in a short story by Louisa May Alcott. The woman in the story is a seeker, and here is what she says. I'm afraid I never shall get religion, for all that's offered me seems so poor, so narrow, or so hard, I cannot accept it. A God of wrath I cannot love, a God that must be adorned and adored like an idol I cannot respect, and a God who can be blinded to men's iniquities through the week by them bowing down on the seventh day I cannot serve. I want a God to whom I can go with all my sins and sorrows, all my hopes and joys, as freely and fearlessly as I used to go to my human father, sure of help and sympathy and love. Shall I ever find such a God? My answer? I certainly hope so. By the end of this passage, Louisa May Alcott is describing the higher power, the source, the being, the spirit that I personally know and love. I feel incredibly fortunate to live in a time in which we can learn from the diverse traditions, spiritual and religious traditions throughout the world. The various concepts of the divine or a higher power are so numerous it would take me the rest of my life to even begin to understand them. But I'm so fascinated by the subject I plan to try. I take great comfort in the wisdom of people who've been on a similar path but longer than I have. Along those lines, one of my heroes is the late, great Thomas Keating. Maybe you've heard of him. Keating was a Trappist monk who helped develop and popularize centering prayer, a form of meditation that springs from contemplative monasticism. In 1984, Keating quietly gathered contemplatives from 8 different religious traditions to spend a week with him at the monastery in Colorado where he was abbot. Other than eating and sleeping, they mostly sat together in silence, inwardly practicing what they brought from their respective religious traditions. The gathering went so well in 1984, Keating continued to hold these multi-faith summits each year for about 2 decades. As the participants got to know each other better, they began speaking during some of their time together. And as they spoke and shared with each other, they discovered they had a lot of common experiences and understandings. Gradually, these contemplatives started creating a list of common beliefs shared by all of them. They listed them under the heading of perennial wisdom. Perennial wisdom teaches there's a basic pattern of spiritual beliefs shared by most religions in the world. Understandably, instead of referring to God, Keating's guests used the phrase ultimate reality to point to the main focus of their traditions. So here are the first 2 common beliefs on their list. Number 1, world religions give various names to ultimate reality. 2, ultimate reality is the ground of infinite potential and cannot be limited by any single concept. The list goes on to define spirituality as opening to, accepting, and responding to ultimate reality. Spirituality, it says, precedes every belief system. No wonder this Roman Catholic monk kept it kind of quiet. I was so taken with this definition of perennial wisdom that Center for Spiritual Wisdom adopted it as our own when we were founded in 2016. It guides all the work that we do today. Now, if there's only one thing you take away from my sermon today, I hope it's this: the idea that God is a kind of shorthand that a lot of us tend to use. God is a symbol for the possibility of the good. If you just boil it all down, all of the words, concepts, scriptures, ideas, and you try to get to what's underneath it, I think it's trying to point to the possibility of the good. It doesn't matter to me how you conceive of this potential for goodness, whether it comes from a higher power, perhaps outside of us, or wells up within from our best human instincts. God is the way we appeal to the capacity for a higher ideal, if you will, a higher love. And I think the world is desperately in need of such a higher ideal, because today our ability to wallow in the lower and the lesser human instincts is just too evident all around us. The great Albert Einstein had some of the most compelling thoughts on religion I've ever encountered. This person, known as the father of modern physics, was not an atheist, but he was also not a traditionally minded believer either. Einstein, as you know, grew quite famous in his day, so he came to realize that both atheists and traditionally minded religious leaders all wanted him to endorse their point of view, but he would have none of it. Instead, he spoke about his own beliefs as the cosmic religious sense. He said this: everyone who is seriously involved in the pursuit of science becomes convinced that spirit is manifest in the laws of the universe, a spirit vastly superior to that of humankind. In this way, the pursuit of science leads to a religious feeling of a special sort. He also said this: you've probably heard it. The most beautiful thing we can experience is the mysterious, the knowledge of the existence of something unfathomable to us. I am satisfied with the mystery of life's eternity. If you hear in Einstein echoes of Walt Whitman or his poetry, I can only agree. So, as promised, once again, in closing, here again are those words from The Leaves of Grass. I say to mankind, be not curious about God. For I, who am curious about each, am not curious about God. No array of terms can say how much I am at peace about God and about death. I hear and behold God in every object, yet understand God not in the least. Thank you.
Please rise as you're willing and able in body or spirit. And we will sing the closing hymn, now number 23, Bring Many Names.
Later in October, we're bringing the author and teacher John Philip Newell, Celtic spirituality master. And so we've been thinking a lot. Therefore, I chose for the benediction a Celtic blessing. May the Creator who made heaven and earth bless us with creativity and wonder. May Jesus, who walked through fields and cities, bless us with kind hands and listening ears. May the Spirit who is around us and within us bless us with the courage to be caring and just. May we work and walk in the strong name of love all our nights and days. Amen.